Okay, we're live. This is the OSRA Daily Scrum for Wednesday, January 14th, 2015. Here we have Brian, Craig, Christian, Morris, and Robbie, and myself. And Christian, let's start with you.
Hello guys.
Okay,
Unfortunately I didn't have time to work on OSRA today, so nothing new from me.
all right. I guess when you do have time, your priority will be pull requests.
The cucumber 315 I think,
Yeah.
and the slab.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Sounds good. Robbie, let's go to you. Robbie, can you hear me? Mm. All right.
They're just playing with you, Nick.
Musical chairs. As soon as I call out somebody's name, person drops off. Well, you seem to be here, Craig, so...
I'm so tempted to hang up. Most of my stuff, well, all of my stuff today has been code review. I've spent a lot of time doing code review, and so there's nothing blocking me.
All right.
That's all there is to say.
Okay. Nice and short. Modesum.
Yes, nothing progressing. I'm just like got the new latest code. I'm running it locally now. I'm going through looking at the way that the HQ views are built. Just trying to understand how things, and then maybe later we'll pick up one of the other tasks in these processes.
Okay. Thanks, by the way, for your fix on that translation.
Yeah, sure.
Brian.
Yep, I was working on the pagination in pair programming with Viv, and I fixed up the sponsor's index PR and implemented it. I wasn't focusing on the priority things.
Yeah.
As far as blockers, there was a few things in code review that I thought we were going to talk about, but I can't remember them at this exact moment, so if you want to come back, I'll look for that.
Yeah, okay. On the pagination PR, what do you think about the comment that Craig has left?
Which comment?
Instead of creating 31 objects, even though they're now created with build stubbed, so database is not touched, but...
Okay. Yeah, I remember which one you're talking about. Well, the development on that PR is going slow.
Yeah.
And I think when we add things like that, which makes more things to test, which makes the PR bigger, seeing as it's already holding up other things and it's a priority PR now, I don't know if adding to the scope is a good idea right now.
It's not adding to the scope, is it, really?
I don't know.
Yeah, this is the request to pass in the per page param, so that instead of...
At the same time, though, when you do that, you're not really testing what's happening in the app. You're testing something else. So I don't know.
But I don't see how the test changes, because right now will paginate simply uses the default value of 30, whereas when you set a value for it, it takes that instead. Ultimately, the functionality is the same.
Because if one day they turn their default value off and we're using it, that would cause this test to fail, wouldn't it?
Well, let's not... I mean, I think the answer to that would be then let's not rely on the default value anywhere.
I thought we were setting it to 14 or what have you, using the per page attribute on the model.
Yeah, that was the other comment that I left, is that that line of code seems to have disappeared completely from the pull request.
It did. There's limited development time for that PR. I don't know what to tell you about that.
Okay. What do you think I mean, you interact with Viv the most. What do you think would be the fastest way to progress for us here? I mean, one of us can just clone the branch, address these concerns, submit a new pull request, and just get it merged in.
Well, I suggested to Viv that she submit the pull request to my repo instead of AV, and I will merge it, and I will fix it up and resubmit it to AV. And she didn't like that, so
Okay.
I mean, I can always do that anyway because GitHub doesn't require authorization. You can, and I found this out a few weeks ago. You can go in anybody's repo and create a pull request, and I had no idea about that. But unless they change that,
What do you mean? You can create a pull request from anybody's repo
yeah,
or
No,
on?
you mean to anyone's repo?
both.
Sorry, you mean to tell me that you can go into my repo and create a new pull request to our main repo from one of my branches?
I
No.
don't know. Let's test it out real quick. I'm pretty sure, and yeah, I think so. I think that's what I'm telling you.
Actually,
Let's
you know
look.
what? Yeah, I can see that being the case.
I'm pretty sure the answer to that is surprisingly yes, which blew me away when I figured it out.
You blow me away too.
So which branch should I grab?
Pick something that hasn't been used. Hound CI, for example, yeah. Oh, that's brilliant.
There you go.
Wonderful.
Yeah, that blew me away.
Okay.
Can you please delete that?
Live and learn, yeah. Yeah,
Yes,
sure.
because both of you are working on the same OSRA. You're forking the same OSRA.
Yeah, and yeah, I think it's everybody who's forked that application.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'll play around with that a little more and see what the limits on that are. But at this point in time, I think the only thing that's restricted to a login is actually merging a PR. I don't think anything else has restrictions. I'm not completely sure about that, though.
That's a little bit mad, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that a lot.
Okay, well, now that we got to play a little, what do you think about the practical solution for that? Like, I mean, I don't want to tick anybody off by taking over their stuff without their permission or agreement.
Yeah, I don't either, and I suggested the idea so that we could expedite the development, and I was respectfully declined.
Okay. To what extent is the pagination holding us up?
It's just on index views,
Well,
isn't
I
it?
guess it's just holding up the other pagination PRs, and with the amount of things that were being held up on other things, it was reducing the amount of available things that we could work on to where it was almost nothing at one point, one day.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's not holding up the other pagination PRs insofar as anybody is free to just replicate every code that's in that PR.
Well, yeah, well, of course, that's always the case, but
I
then you
mean,
run 50,000 merge conflicts and whatnot.
yeah, but I'm just thinking in terms of, you know, in terms of what's common to everything, it's the addition of the two gems, right? Because everything else that's in that pull request is unique to the partners, I think, isn't it?
Well, I think it's all. I think as far as each individual change, yes, probably is unique, but the general way that the changes are made, I think, is not going to be that unique once we decide on them.
Yeah. But if let's say at this point, you know,
What if
looking
we
at,
what if we did pagination for one of the other models, and then we adjusted the partners to be closer to that one, which would presumably already be merged at that point?
I think if she's going to get upset at having someone help her finish the PR, and someone comes along and pushes in some code that kind of overtakes that, that's going to cause.
Well,
yeah,
I don't think it's really upset, but she is working really hard on it, and I kind of remember where I was at in her situation, so
Well, if she's working really hard on it, she needs to be given the space to do it, I think, you know.
fair enough.
maybe we should just hold off on that for a little while and see how that goes.
Yeah.
He's not logging into Slack regularly.
Huh?
I'm saying she's not online regularly on Slack, like we can.
She is, but she's got a lot of stuff right now with her job. She's been really busy. They're changing things, and it's causing her schedule to get full temporarily.
I mean, she's close to finishing, isn't she?
Yeah.
You're not talking about it's still being a million miles off, and if she just needs a little space, then you know, let's give her that space, and then deal with it if it does become a problem. But I think what we're saying is it's not a problem at the moment, is it? Is that right?
I think it's not an urgent problem, though.
Yeah.
Plus, I have to give props for this change right here.
Which change?
The one that's on my screen.
I'm not seeing your screen. I'm just seeing you, Nick.
Oh. Did I not share it? I thought I had.
Cool.
This particular little bit here. I'm surprised you let that slip in, Brian.
Oh, that change. Oh. Hey, to each their own.
Alright. Okay.
I wasn't at the keyboard, so.
Right. Robbie, let's go to you.
Yeah, hi there. Got my sound sorted out so I can now hear things. So I spent a bit of time today fixing up a couple of things around the users shift to Rails. And there was a bit of debate about the scope of the testing of the controller. So we could maybe have a bit of discussion about that after the Scrum. I did also look into the facility of setting the fields which are mandatory with an asterisk, and there's kind of like something which you can do generally, but it seemed a wee bit OTT for our particular project. So that's maybe something we could have a wee chat about after the Scrum as well. Apart from that, I don't think I did anything. So that's about it from me.
All right. Okay. For me, I got my PR merged today thanks to some help from Motosim, and then I left some code review comments, and I think that's actually it. So not a particularly productive day, but baby steps. Anything else for the Scrum guys?
Not from me.
No.
All right. So let's talk about tests. I actually, if you don't mind, Robbie, I might go first because I was reading through that discussion that was happening on the pull requests, and it kind of it got me to take a step back and to think about our testing approach altogether, not just in the particular case of view specs or what have you, but overall how we do our testing. And I wonder if we're missing I'm aware that I might contradict what I've said previously right now, but I wonder if we're missing the kind of the key aspect of the BDD TDD workflow, where the idea is that you write something high level first, and then you write the low level. You descend down into lower and lower levels as you flesh out a feature, whatever it is that you're working on. So you start out by saying that the user should be able to sign up or sign in, and then you drill down into the individual components of how that should happen if necessary. So I started wondering if we're missing too much of the high-level tests, whether they be Cucumber or RSpec feature tests.
Oh.
But we're, I'm not, first of all, I don't know. I haven't written any of the pull requests that we're talking about. I don't know how they were written, whether TDD was actually followed or the tests were sort of backfilled for existing functionality. But it seems to me that if you were implementing, for example, this is how you edit a user, you would start by probably writing a higher level integration test of some sort, saying, I go here, I fill this in with that, I click the button, and then something happens. And then, go with that test until you run into the situation where the test is not giving you enough of a failure, basically. And then you descend down to either a view spec or a controller spec. But I'm wondering if we're delegating too much of our testing to these low-level unit tests and not doing enough, or in our case, we're not doing any integration testing.
I would agree.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
And
I think there's a place for both. Yeah, I think there's a place for the high level end-to-end sort of test that really the Cucumber's providing, plus the module testing, as it were, for each of the individual products.
I think if you had those functional tests, you could lose all this stuff we've been discussing in the controller as well.
Yeah, I think that's kind of how I arrived at it too, because I think that there's a lot of testing of low-level detail, but ultimately you still don't know if the system works.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure I'd necessarily agree with you, Craig, on saying that if you had some tests at the high level, that it necessarily dispenses with.
I didn't say dispenses.
I
didn't say dispenses. I said it would lose a lot of the controller tests that we've been discussing. So maybe the tests where we're still seeing whether it renders something, all that standard controller tests, but the tests where we're seeing whether variables are assigned, we could lose those because they become irrelevant when you've got a functional test that shows that the view renders and that it displays what you need it to display.
And I think that might address Brian's comment from the PR where the form is being tested. The fact that each field is displayed and it's pre-populated with correct data. Again, if you have a functional test.
Well, you could say the same about individual tests, like it should redirect to. There are controller tests which say that if something fails, it should redirect to something or re-render something. There's the same argument you'd apply to those. You could lose those. And then, at the end of the day, you could say, well, we could lose all the module tests because it's all tested at the higher level.
That would lead us right back to where we are with the other Cucumber.
No. Well, we would definitely avoid turning our feature specs into view specs, for example, because the integration test, I don't think it. I would still advise that we stay on a very high level of abstraction. We don't descend down to CSS selectors and things like that. I'll bring the the example of ThoughtBot, which I know that I go back to them basically every time I think about something. In this article, I think I've shared it before, but the idea is that I think the way it is written, the structure is intentional in that it begins with feature specs. And the sort of the transition to lower level specs is that in testing every possible path through the application with feature specs would be the overhead is too high, and as well as testing any edge cases. And so that's where you descend down to model controller and view specs. But the overall functionality of the application gets tested in a higher level test. So testing paths, testing branches through a controller method, that would be better suited for a controller spec. Testing that, if a certain condition is triggered, then, for example, a flash message is rendered, that's the job for the view spec. But the overall testing that, if I visit the user page and fill in the fields with valid data and I hit update, the user should be updated. That can be handled by a higher level integration test. Yes.
Sorry, can you say that again, Nick?
Basically, I would say that we have we can test a main path through a particular bit of functionality in a high-level integration test, and then if we need to test branching or conditionals or things like that, then that, or edge cases, then that gets handled in the lower-level test.
That's not bad.
But and Brian, to address your concern specifically, even if whether it's Cucumber or RSpec feature tests or whatever it is, at least the sort of the face of the test can still be kept at a very high level of abstraction, in the sense that when I go to the user edit page and I fill in the fields with correct new information, then the user should be updated, basically. That's the level of the test, and it's then the step definitions for that, or in RSpec features, I think it's right within the feature, that actually handles all the low-level, fill in this selector with this value.
So I do agree that you should have like system-like level tests, whether you have them written in RSpec or Cucumber. But I think if you're going to say that because of that, certain types of things shouldn't be tested, like you shouldn't test the setting of global instance variables, then I would disagree with you there.
I don't think global instance variables should be tested anywhere, really. That's up to the...
Well, the controller set them correctly. Because if you do a module test, if you're testing a module, you really test functionality that module provides. Plus, you test any side effects of that module, and the side effect is actually setting the instance variables. I mean, I know because all my tests were passing, because I didn't test the instance variable, and then but the form was still going wrong.
But an integration test would pick that up.
Yeah, well, an integration test would pick up, doing a redirect versus a re-render as well. Why do you say that one should be done and one shouldn't be done?
Because testing that that specific variables are set is a brittle way to check what's working and what's not working.
I disagree because it's a side effect that module has, that the controller has, is the setting of those instance variables, and really they need to be set correctly so that the functionality will work.
Well, I'm sure we can debate for a very long time about. I mean, it sounds to me like we're now talking about the exhaustiveness of our tests at each level.
I just came across this as well. I'm sorry, Nick. I just came across that as well. I've just put something in, which is kind of like the default Rails or spec controller test. So there, in that table that thing that you have just there, which I think seems to me to be very sensible in terms of what you should test with a controller.
Yeah. I think we're. I don't know. Maybe this is. I don't know how to describe it. Maybe a slight difference of philosophies here or something like that. Where basically unit tests have the capability to test everything line by line, the code that you've written. So basically for every line of code you have a test that covers it. And the question is it worth descending down to that level or not? You know, we talked about, in the case of view specs, for example, we talked about, you know, but what if what if something is basically mistyped or copy pasted incorrectly? Then the view spec that essentially duplicates the entire thing that the view does should catch that. And on the one hand, I mean, I understand that yes, that is exactly true. But on the other hand, you know, if you start going down that path, are we going to start writing tests for our tests? You know, if we're trying to make sure that everything was actually typed correctly and written correctly, and everything is the internal functionality of every method performs the way the method was written.
Yeah, but I mean, we're not really discussing. I think we're talking about what sort of tests should be done. So, I mean, what I think Craig is saying is that we should do tests which test the whether it redirects or re-renders, for example, but we shouldn't test to see whether it set the instance variables correctly. Right, Craig?
Well, yeah, your instance variables will show up like a sore thumb with a simple integration test.
Mind you, so will the render or the redirect.
So
well,
so
no,
will
if you're not checking every
render. So will the? I mean, if you're checking for invalid entry in your form, a re-render and or redirect is going to show up pretty quickly.
But we've just said we're not going to check every path, didn't we?
Well, I think it depends on what we mean by every path. Is it just well, first of all, you know, we haven't even agreed that this is the approach that we will take. But if, for example, we were, then are we testing the, you know, for every interface that the application provides, essentially for every page that the application provides to the user, do we test a happy path and a sad path through it? and then if there are edge cases where it's not a clear-cut set path, then that's something that gets tested in the controller, or possibly even in the view spec.
Well, I certainly think you should test the happy path and some trailing paths, but I think the happy path is also the path that sets the user instance variables. In that case, the correct instance variables.
I mean, yeah.
Go on, Nick.
I was going to say that if we, first of all we've written so far are very basic CRUD controllers and views. There's been nothing special about any of them. So if we say that we write integration tests where for every one of these action view combinations we have one integration test that does the happy path, one integration test that does the sad path, then it sounds to me like we can essentially get rid of the entire suite of controller and view specs that we have in place at the moment.
That's what Minitest effectively does, doesn't it?
So you don't have any controller tests, is that what you're saying?
No, Minitest doesn't. The problem that we're discussing at the moment is pretty much RSpec specific, because RSpec has split what Minitest calls functional tests into controller tests and view tests. So you don't need to check your assigns variables at all in Minitest, because you set up your controller, you run your controller, and you assert what you see in the view.
But I mean, I know that I was on with Nick the other day, and we were saying that the view tests really should just test the view, and we should stop out the other things like the controller and the model stuff.
Well, you're only stubbing out the controller because you've separated the two. In Minitest, you have one suite of tests, and the controller and the view tests become a single item, and you don't have these issues.
Are these essentially like request specs in our spec, which I think are being deprecated if they haven't been got rid of altogether?
I'm not sure what request specs are, I have to be honest.
Request specs. No, I think it's more of a feature, I guess. Oh yeah, and I guess routing specs would be another thing that we could axe if we had high-level integration tests for this kind of stuff. Although perhaps not. I guess we still want to check that somebody can't type in a URL. Well, maybe we don't need to come to a decision right now. Maybe this is something to think about. But it seems that we can't agree on some of the things for these low-level scenarios. But maybe that's because we're operating at a very low level to begin with. I guess what are we doing then? We leave this discussion for another day, and people can have a think about it.
I mean, to be honest, I am. If you really want me to take them out, I'll take them out. At the end of the day, it's not something I'm emotionally attached to, as it were. But I mean, I would just argue, I suppose, quite strongly that if you're doing tests at the module at the module level, then that does require you testing the functionality of the module and any side effects it has.
I think, Robbie,
and I think that you should have them tested somewhere, because I think what I was finding was that I was having problems with the with the functionality. It wasn't working right, and yet my tests were all passing. So.
But then, what do you think about this? Maybe the way to look at it is that the entire test suite should be covering 100% of our code, but we don't need a lot of overlap between integration and unit tests. So if the integration test exercises the controller and the route and the view, then we don't necessarily need to test these things at the very low level to make sure that internally they function the way they have been written.
Yeah, I mean, the advantage of module tests are if you go messing around later and one of your module tests fails, you know exactly where it is. Whereas if you have an integration test and it fails, you have to really search around to try and find, well, where was the actual problem.
That's a fair point. I would say that debugging messages or whatever the error messages that Rails gives are usually fairly good at leading you to the right direction, but it's a point taken for sure.
Yeah, there might not be any Rails error messages. I mean, what I was finding was that, for example, when you come back to the new form, if you put in some bad data and that you kind of submit it and there's wrong and it's wrong, and you come back to the new form, then you expect to see the data that you entered there, and it wasn't. You know, that was a problem I was facing when I was actually running it in in the browser.
And why was it failing?
There wasn't any Rails message.
Sorry,
Why was it failing, Robbie?
Well, it was because the way I was doing the update, you know, the update that I was doing wasn't setting the instance variables. I was just doing something like I can't remember, it was an update attributes or something based on the user hash that came through in the params. So that it didn't have the effect of updating the instance variables. So when you re-rendered the new form, it didn't have what you entered previously.
So are we saying when we do an update params, the instance doesn't get updated?
But not the way that I was calling it. Because I think I was just calling it like update attributes or something. I was just updating the record in the database based on the params hash, but wasn't changing the app user instance variables.
Is that right, Nick?
I'm not...
No, it's not right. I shouldn't have been doing it. Yeah.
No, sorry. I'm not saying what you did is wrong. What I'm saying is I would expect update attributes to update the instance variable as well.
Is this the pull request here, Robbie? 283, OSRA 333?
Yeah, oh yes, it's not in there any longer because I changed it, the way I was doing the updates. Yeah, so in the create statement, rather, you see down there where it said you add user.attributes equals user params. Instead of that, I was just doing, I think, at user something like update attributes and then passing user params as a parameter or something.
How can you call update attributes?
I can't remember. Let me
Yeah, can you look that up? I'm curious. But you shouldn't be able to call update attributes on a non-persisted record, I think, should you?
Hey, Andre.
Hello.
Hey, Andre.
Hey.
Hello.
Robbie, while you're looking for that code, Andre, do you want to tell us what you've been up to today
Uh, yeah, very busy with other stuff, so nothing to report.
All right. Nice and short.
Do you want some bad news,
Bad
Andre?
news. Yeah.
Oh no.
What are the bad news? No
Yesterday,
new features.
yes, there was. There was.
So, what's the bad news?
You missed the vote yesterday.
I missed what?
You missed the vote yesterday.
We voted on a feature.
Oh, I missed the one. Yeah, that's terrible.
He's taken it very well.
He's crying on the inside and punching the wall. We just don't see.
I don't think that's as bad as the epic fail we had where there was no ship at Squirrels on the day we went live.
That was inexcusable.
Yes.
I'm sorry. That was.
Now, however, there are a lot of ship squirrels.
Well, I think Brian's trying to make up for that lapse of judgment. Robbie, any luck with that bit of code?
Yeah. I'm not sure.
Is there anything I could take, by the way?
Yeah, it'll take me maybe a couple of minutes.
Yeah. Oh, lots of stuff, I think, isn't there?
I haven't been looking at the OSRA board.
Oh yeah, there's tons of stuff. Basically, all the Rails. What is this about?
Christian, did you have any chance to work on the facade?
No, was very busy, but
Yeah, okay.
I have time tomorrow,
Okay.
so we'll talk tomorrow then. Let's see.
Was this fixed? Does anybody remember the fact that the country filter drop down on the sponsor page shows country codes instead of full names?
It should. Oh,
Which drop down?
which task?
Country drop down on the sponsor index page OSRA 351. And what the heck?
Drop down on sponsor index page.
What is this that I'm looking at here? 502 bad gateway OSRA testing.
No, it still has two-letter country codes.
Okay, so that's something that needs to be addressed. I wonder what's going on with our testing server.
The first thing I would wonder is the production one up. Yeah, the production one is online.
All right. Well, the production has monitoring on it, so hopefully I would have heard something if it went down.
Bad gate. What's HTTP 502? And before anybody says bad gateway,
He's quick, isn't he?
Is that an overcapacity thing?
Is that what, sorry? No, that's no good.
502?
the server was acting as a gateway or proxy and received an invalid response from the upstream server.
What the hell is that supposed to mean?
Well, they're saying it can happen when you're overloaded. So Twitter's fail whales are 502. So obviously our OSRA app is so popular, it's taken down Heroku.
The testing part? Testing?
Yeah, I think that's probably likely.
Someone is DDoSing OSRA.
Hmm. Well, I see the error messages, but they're not telling me anything.
Can you show the messages?
Yeah, sorry, just a second. I need to change my screen share. Do you see it?
Yeah. Fusion Passenger, is this Heroku's idea?
No, that's what we're using as our server.
So you actually had to explicitly use Passenger. You couldn't just deploy the Rails app without telling that you're using this particular server.
If you don't, you get WebRec.
Oh.
By default, if you want anything else, you have to specify.
Oh. I didn't know that.
And yeah, we were on Unicorn for a while, and then
Mm-hmm.
it was failing. So, and then Passenger seems to have solved those problems. But I'm wondering what the heck I'm looking at here.
Standard error.
I think you're looking at an error log.
Cheers, Brian. Just keep them coming tonight, huh? Okay, well, I don't know what to make of this.
Is Passenger working with Ruby 2.2? Is it compatible?
That's a really good question because of that one line I'm seeing about the bad symbol, undefined symbol.
Oh, that it got garbage collected.
Yeah.
Oh, wouldn't that be funny?
Ooh.
I don't know how this garbage collection works. How does it
I don't know how it
work?
works either, but I know it happens now and it didn't before.
Moving back to Unicorn now?
Or downgrading to 2 point whatever. Huh. I guess one way to test it would be to push this up to staging and see if that starts failing, but that may not be the brightest idea.
Maybe there's
As
an
long as
option.
it stops at staging.
Yeah.
Maybe there's an option to stop these garbage connections of the symbols.
Wasn't the whole idea to migrate to 2.2 because of this garbage collection?
No, I mean just to test it if this is the reason.
Can you dynamically switch to a different server?
No, it's in your gem file, so
To the gem files? Okay.
yeah.
Well, if you click back, what was that other result that you didn't select? The one right below it. That looked like better Ruby 2.2 support. What version of Nginx are we using?
What version of Nginx? Do you have information about Nginx here as well?
Oh, it's 1.6.2. Sorry, I got it.
So it's fine.
On that 502 page?
Yep.
Nick, your Vim color scheme looks like my skin when it gets sunburned.
All the blues and greens or whatever they are. Well, it is solarized, so there you have it.
Oh,
Why am I not seeing passenger here?
Good question.
How can that be?
well, is passenger a gem?
Isn't it
Isn't it compiled against Apache or Nginx?
Oh, because it's in production, it's not on. That's why. No, but that should still be in gem file lock, no?
Unicorn is definitely a gem, so are you saying that passenger is not?
No, it's a gem. I'm just thinking that because my environment here locally is developed.
Oh, and you're using Fabric, but it still doesn't make sense.
Well, if you did bundle install minus or without production, I don't think you have it here.
Okay. Okay, so your gem file has been created for the development environment, the gem file lock.
Wait a minute, why the hell does
Where
my
is it?
production... Oh, sorry, I'm in the wrong place. I'm looking in the wrong place. Excuse me.
It's not on OSRA?
This is... I have actually separate folders for testing, staging, and production, and they're completely not up to date, but I keep them for when I need to communicate with Heroku. Because I didn't want to put all the Heroku remotes into the main OSRA folder. "4055" is what it says. 4057 gives you better Ruby 2.2 support.
Time
So
to upgrade.
4.0.55 supports Ruby 2.2 and 4.0.57 is better.
Right,
What's the difference?
just better.
Do we know that 4.0.55 supports
Well,
Ruby
saying it says there version 4.056 already introduced Ruby 2.2 support, I would guess no.
Oh,
I thought on the previous page, I thought I saw that it was 5.5. Yeah,
I
here.
thought so too. Yeah.
yeah.
But maybe upgrading to 5.7 is not a bad idea then.
I don't think that's such a bad idea either.
All right. Expect a pull request. Sorry, Robbie, we kind of hijacked the discussion. Do you have anything, or still
No, I can't remember what I had, to be honest, but I do know I did have those problems. I think one of the things which I did wrong was when I was doing the params.permit, I had forgot to put in the params of user.permit, and that meant that there was a blank hash being sent, so the right variables that were sent up in the post request weren't actually getting through.
Okay, yeah, I can see how that would cause problems. Actually, Andre, since you were here, do you want to cast the deciding vote?
Oh, would love to. For what?
Tell us in 10 words or less what you think about integration tests.
That's not a fair question.
What was the context? Integration tests are great. What was the context? You're getting rid of Cucumber or what?
The context that are getting very detailed. So the view specs, the controller specs, they're getting, and there's discussion on the latest PRs about just how much of controllers action to test. And so one of the alternatives that we discussed was if we had higher level integration tests, We could reserve controller and view test for edge cases and maybe conditional branches.
I love that. But I think I think we discussed it at some point, or maybe something similar to that. And Nikita was saying that testing, like the form that you input everything in the form, and then when you, I don't know, submit the form, that all the values remain in the form. That would be a bad integration or a bad cucumber test.
Well, I still remain convinced that that would be a bad cucumber test.
I don't really understand why, but okay. You were saying something like it is testing. It is a very low level testing. I don't understand this philosophy. I don't know what is low level testing. What is very low level testing?
Very high level testing would be when I edit a user and I enter correct data, the update succeeds. Or when I enter incorrect data, the update fails.
Okay, so I get I'm checking this by the flash message, right?
Whichever way, I think the step definitions get very low level because they have to. But the actual scenario written in in Gherkin stays high level.
Yeah.
Are you laughing at Gherkin?
I'm laughing at the way you said it. It was like all your hate.
No, I've kept some for later. Don't worry. Anyway, we can I don't know. We stopped the discussion without coming to a conclusion that everybody was happy with. Maybe we come back to this, I don't know, tomorrow or the day after.
I don't think I have a very strong opinion about any of these approaches. I would be fine with either of them.
Okay, so
I guess I have a question. How is Andre now the deciding vote, now that there's an even number of people?
Do we have 3 voices against 3 voices, or?
I'm abstaining. How about that?
No, I think you really have a strong opinion about this. It's definitely much stronger than my opinion.
The problem is that my opinion has changed. I think you pointed out correctly that at the beginning I was, at least that kind of integration test that you've just described, I was very strongly against it. But now that I see what we get out of unit tests without any integration tests, I'm starting to doubt my initial position, basically. And the other thing that I described earlier, I think it really speaks to me, this idea that if you practice BDD and TDD, then you sit down and you write that high-level test.
Yeah.
And then you go down, further down the abstraction levels.
So when you go down the abstraction levels, do you still write the test before the code?
Definitely. I shared, I don't know if anybody actually happened to have a look at it. There was a brief video from, what was it called, Ruby Tapas, I think, where the developer who does those videos, he explained the way he tests. And that was exactly his approach, is that he doesn't start out by worrying about test coverage or what sort of like he doesn't set out to have a certain number of tests or anything like that. The way he starts is he writes this very high level test, and the test fails.
Yeah,
And
but
he writes,
if you remember his test, he's basically saying that I have this kind of text, and I want, or rather this kind of input, and I want to transform it into this kind of output. So it is high level, but it is not testing that everything happened okay. It is actually testing that this kind of test was transformed into this kind of test.
right. But that's very true. But his approach after that was that once he starts writing code, but the failure that he keeps seeing is the same one.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when I put in A, I should get B, and it's red, 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 but the failure is still the same. I put in A, and I don't get B out. That doesn't tell him anything about where the failure is occurring. So at that point, he drops down the abstraction level and writes something a bit more specific, targeted at the piece of code that he's writing at the moment. And it sounded to me like that approach was, and I'm not saying that this is anything groundbreaking. I believe that probably everybody here has actually done that in the past, but it was just this kind of maybe just hearing it out loud, this formalized description, it really spoke to me.
So when he finds a low-level problem, right, in his code, does he actually write a low-level test to kind of identify it and make sure that it doesn't happen again?
Yeah. First of all, let me try to find the link and I'll share it with you again.
But you see, not all tests should be kept forever. So there's nothing wrong with writing a low-level test if you're finding that something's going wrong. But when you fix it, if that test is redundant, then it can be taken out. And or not even redundant. Redundant suggests that it doesn't perform any use whatsoever. But if it's unlikely to be an issue, I mean, it's standard practice for some people in controllers to test assigns, but we're going even beyond that. We're not just checking assigns, we're then taking the variable and check that
That's your link, Nikita.
that parameters that parameters on those instance variables have been set correctly. I mean, we could take that.
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of also.
Sorry, go on, Robbie.
No, I was just going to say I've felt a bit the same with some of the model tests, which test for presence and this sort of thing, because they're kind of like nearly like duplicates of the code. So if you've got the code in there, why do you really need the testing? Because it seems like doing something twice. They don't seem to add a lot of value to me, those tests for presence of this, that, and the other.
You're
Once you've got it working.
I would agree.
Okay.
Or if we had them, I'd rather them not be shoulda matches, because all that does is it's not checking behavior, it's checking implementation. So, but
yeah,
yes,
Robbie, I agree. I mean, I've written a lot of those tests that are in the code base, and when I see them now, I see that they hardly add anything at all except for to go after.
Hello? Hello?
Yeah.
Yep,
Okay.
still there.
I lost a bit of sound there.
I mean,
Sorry.
Like I said, if you really want me to take them out, I'll happily take them out.
Well, it's not that we're desperate. I mean, I would like to see them out, but that's because I have a belief. And what's more important to me on whether they stay in or come out is that the more we talk over this and go through people's different perspectives and argue it out, that hopefully the closer we come to an optimal solution, that'll become stable and until either the code base gets much bigger and we find that we've made some error in judgment and we've got to fix things again. But it's not so much about what goes in that pull request and what comes out. For me, it's more important about understanding testing better and what gives us value and what doesn't give us value and what other people's thoughts are on that, to be honest with you.
Okay, good.
So in terms of actionable solutions, where does this leave us?
Well, I think maybe it's a quick vote on whether people are happy with what we're doing, or do we want to sleep on it and talk about it, or later, and whether we're just going to put PRs as they stand at the moment through without.
Yeah, I think it might not be a bad idea to let it go for tonight at least and come back to it tomorrow or the day after.
If we wanted to use an integration test to check whether the form is filled in correctly or is saved correctly, that means that for each input field of the form, we need to write a separate step definition, right? Because we can't use CSS tags in our steps.
I don't think there's anything wrong with using CSS tags, and Nick may have a very different opinion on this.
Yeah, Nick also doesn't like that.
If they're used cleverly. So if I mean, Ruby uses CSS IDs for all your form elements, and they're not going to change anytime soon. That's much better off filling in information based on those rather than checking for a table row or a table header, or because that's HTML that we may change in the future. But if we're going on CSS classes or CSS IDs, I have less of an issue with that. I don't know what Nick thinks on that.
Sorry, have I expressed opinion against CSS selectors?
I think so. When during one of our with Christian's pull requests, I think we tried to use a CSS selector in the step description, and you said that the CSS selectors do not.
Oh, in a scenario description.
In the scenario description, yes.
Well,
because it would be trivial to write just one kind of a scenario description, one line of code in Gherkin for a CSS selector. That would be a variable, right? And then check that for each of the input with this CSS selector you want to have this value. For an input with this CSS selector you want that value. That would be just one line of Gherkin, one kind of step definition. But otherwise, if CSS do not belong in the scenario description, then you need to write a lot of step definition. Then I'm definitely against that.
I think it depends on what CSS selector you're using. So if you're using something that is refining something based on HTML elements, I think that's a bad thing. If you're honing in on an ID.
See, to me, there are I think two separate topics here. One is I think a scenario whose steps, so this is in the .feature file. If a scenario descends down to the level of, and I fill in this with that, that's too low level for Cucumber. And it's not really a question of even CSS selectors versus some kind of a, prettified string. It's the fact that that's too low level of a scenario.
For your Gherkin bit, you mean?
Yeah, for the Gherkin bit. So for the Gherkin bit, I would, as I said earlier, the example I gave, I wasn't trying to be contrite. I mean that I can see a scenario. If we do this in Cucumber, I see the scenario being, if I go to the edit page for maybe not even that. Maybe if I edit this user and provide correct information, then this user should be updated.
Yep.
Like that's the scenario. There's no CSS anywhere near this. This is just the as high level of abstraction as you get. But then when you define those steps, when I edit the user with correct information, then your steps use any kind of identifier you like, and the more specific the better, and if it's CSS, then so be it.
Yeah, in step definition, definitely. You didn't argue against that.
Yeah, but in the scenario, CSS or no, I would argue that it's too low level.
No, I agree with that. Sorry, I was going down the wrong path there. I agree with what Nick's saying there.
Okay, then probably the only way to test our views that our form is filled in correctly and saves or displays the adequate information, then that would be just our spec test.
No. We can still do it in Cucumber, but we've got two parts of Cucumber. We've got the feature,
yeah,
and we've got our step definitions, haven't we?
Yes.
So what Nick's saying is, when I edit a user with new details, then those details should be updated. That's your description in Cucumber, but then in your step definitions file, you implement that in terms of click on this or fill in this, and you put all the steps in necessary to make that high-level task pass.
But that means that you have, in your step definition, you need for each individual field, you need to write a separate step definition, don't you? Because you can't reutilize your, like normally in your scenario, in your scenario you can have a line of gherkin, a line of code, where you can identify something reusable, like when I fill in the first the first orphan in something, right? And you can take when I fill in something and take the first orphan, and in your step definition you're only changing the first orphan, right?
Step definitions can call other step definitions.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, then you can reutilize them. And there's the approach that I think, Christian, you and I discussed at one point. It was based on another article that we'd read about step definitions being implemented in terms of Ruby methods. Yeah. So your step definition is, for example, the method would be, let me think here. The method written in Ruby would be fill in name with, and then an argument that you supply to that method, and the method uses Capybara internally to do the filling. But then that method can be called from any number of steps, and each step can be written differently to suit the particular needs of the scenario that you're working within. I'm not explaining it well. If anybody's interested in that, I can share the article from which that idea came.
Yeah, that's interesting. It is an interesting idea.
My pull request about the Cucumber, I used that, and I created a basic steps helper, and there are helper methods written in Ruby, and instead of the step definitions, I only call them. So for login, I have only a method login. For logout, just a method logout. That's all I need in the steps.
Here, I just found a link. I'm going to post it. Okay, so shall we come back to this discussion?
Yeah, I mean, I think the only thing we can guarantee is we're still not going to get it right this time round. You know, we've talked about this so many times before, and I think we make little improvements each time. but as our understanding improves and the complexity of the growing app improves, we get a different take on it.
Yep.
And
I think probably one thing we are agreed about, we should have some kind of like feature-like tests, maybe written in our spec, which test it end to end. Is that correct?
I'd rather see stuff done in Cucumber.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't really mind Cucumber or spec, but one or the other, something which actually tests it as a feature. Yeah, not just live with the low-level kind of MVC type test.
Yeah.
So then the summary of this talk seems to be that everybody's in favor of feature tests, and the question then comes down to how much of the unit tests do we eliminate by introducing features?
I think so.
Okay. Well, if we're all in favor of feature tests, then the one action that we can take right away is let's start writing feature tests for everything that we do.
Don't we have to merge in?
Well, yes, we do.
Well, no. I mean, going forward, yeah. I don't mean that we hold up every single PR that's in place now.
I think my PR has to be the
Yeah,
first
that's
one.
what I meant.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
Christian's. Yeah.
Oh, right, yeah. Okay, well, let's hope that
Tomorrow
progresses.
morning I'll take care of that.
All right.
Could we just go on to that other thing I was wondering about, which was the setting of the mandatory fields? I think this might be less controversial, Nick. So I think some of you saw something I pushed up, which is something I found on the net about like a global sort of thing to set an asterisk at, just beside the fields which are mandatory, which Active Admin does something like this as well. It didn't totally work for partners because it didn't solve the issue around province and status, and it seemed to me we would need a bit of a hack to get it to work the way that we want it to work. And overall, my opinion was that, well, it isn't huge, this project and the number of fields, then we should really just set it individually by hand, probably using the HTML5 require attribute, and then we can do anything in CSS which requires styling. For example, you could add an asterisk in CSS then to fields which had a require attribute. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, Robin. Craig, it seems that you have an opinion on this.
That was me joking. If you click on if you look at the arrow.
Because this is that was your
yeah. It's
right.
Just,
Okay. Does anybody have any thoughts on this? Should we try to pursue this and see if we can do this, get the application to do this automatically, or go with the solution that Robbie is proposing, that we just do it manually for each form?
I think maybe it's given the path that we've taken or are taking at the moment, maybe manually is the best. What are other people's?
So you're only talking about marking the required fields with asterisks, right?
Yep.
Or yes, I mean that's the usual way they do it, Andre. I think in forms, so something like that.
So what is the opposition? What is the opposite view then?
So there's two ways that we can identify fields that are required. One is there's a bit of code which I found on the internet, which is kind of like a generic bit of code, and you kind of redefine some of the Rails stuff. And what it does is it looks at the the attribute that you're trying to put out, and then it sees is there a presence required or presence true
So it
aspect
will
in the model
automatically
for that attribute.
Okay, it will automatically put the
Yes,
asterisk through
exactly.
it.
Yeah, so it's
Oh, I see. Oh, I would do that.
so that's what I was looking at. But it doesn't work 100%, and it didn't work for the partner stuff because of some of the way that the province and status things are set in partner. So you know, just using that code per se doesn't actually solve the problem totally. You need to do bits and pieces to actually get it to work, 100%. And you know, once also I felt a wee bit about, you're actually a bit hacking into Rails here, and things could change. You could be having to redo that if the Rails code changed for whatever reason. So, I mean, what I thought was the better solution was really just setting it manually. And there's an HTML5 require attribute that you can set on something, and then if you use CSS styling to, say, add a star on, or otherwise indicate that a field is mandatory.
Okay.
I think that sounds, the second solution that you're proposing, Robbie, I think that sounds reasonable. As Craig pointed out, we only have a handful of forms. Basically, hopefully the client does not end up changing things too often from required to optional. But even if they do, of course, we still have to either remove or add the validation in the model, and as part of that chore, we just have to remember to stick an asterisk on, or with the HTML qualifier on the tag, which I think is pretty reasonable.
Is this the HTML qualifier that goes into the label? Or into the input?
Yeah, it's in your form fields. Whenever you have a form, you would need to specify in each form field, you would need to specify the require attribute in the field.
Do you remember if it goes into the label or in the input of the form?
Well, it'll go into the input of the form, one of the attributes, but then the CSS can actually change the label to add the star onto the label.
Okay, interesting.
Okay, so it sounds like we're in agreement on that.
Yeah. Isn't there some bootstrap stuff that I'm just trying to find it at the moment? I thought there was. Yeah, if you've got.
I am looking now at.
There's input with success, input with warning, and input with error, isn't there? But I don't see.
Look here.
Yes, Andre, that's it. That's the.
Yeah, but it doesn't. It doesn't put the asterisk. It changes the CSS on the input itself, on the input field. It doesn't do anything to the label.
Oh, that's right. You would need to actually write the CSS, which would add something to the label. I'm pretty sure that could be done.
Yeah.
Okay.
My CSS is pretty rusty. I don't know how you would go from
input to label. Apparently, in that link which I posted, the label is created automatically. I understand what's going on.
Okay. Well, there is probably a solution, I guess, is the upshot of this. So, Robbie, do you want to then? How do you want to proceed? Do you want the this pull request closed, but this chore OSRA 335 to be assigned to you still, and you'll investigate how to do this?
Well, I mean, if we're agreed that we wouldn't change things generically, yeah, we'd close that pull request. But the other way, we'd need to actually set that parameter into the, into the form.
Okay, so whoever's working on the form for each model needs to implement that.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Right. If you go to getbootstrap.com and look at input groups.
Okay, there's something there then, you reckon?
Yeah, possibly.
Where is input groups, Greg?
So if you look at the menu on the side, are you in the Java? Are you in the components section?
Now I am.
And then come down to input groups on the menu on the right-hand side.
Input groups.
It's only about the 4th or 5th down.
Yeah.
Then come down to the basic example.
Ah.
I think we've probably got, there's I've not looked at it definitively. I'm sure I knew I'd seen it somewhere, but I'm sure something like that would buy us something.
Yeah. Let me just.
Can you put that URL in the chat there?
Yeah. Sorry, Robbie. Just bear with me.
I think I got it.
Oh.
Spam.
Okay, I'll have a wee look around that and see what way it's best to actually mark the fields. But I think that there's a consensus that we should go with a manual identifying of mandatory fields rather than trying to do something automatically.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if that had been like a total solution, it might have been worth considering. But if we still got things that we still need to take care of over and above that, it seems to be more.
Yeah, exactly.
More hassle than it's worth.
Yeah. Okay, that's about it. Thanks.
All right, guys. Nothing else for tonight?
Not from me.
In that case, I guess we're done, and until tomorrow.
Okey-doke. See ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.